Vendors and healthcare providers can learn a thing or two from nonprofit organizations about engaging patients and caregivers. I say that because you are about to watch my conversation with Vincent Del Gaizo and Erin Moriarty Wade from the Childhood Arthritis and Rheumatology Research Alliance, also known as CARRA. I was in awe of the way that the clinicians and researchers in that organization work alongside patients and caregivers. It is frankly inspiring. Let's get to it.
Swaay.Health.
Erin, Vincent, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Colin. We really appreciate you having us today.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have both of you on. Thank you for taking the time. I'm excited to learn more about CARRA, but also just in general, having a great conversation with you. But before we dive in deeply into the topic today, Erin, Vincent, if you could maybe give our audience a little bit of background of CARRA and then a little bit about yourselves.
So CARRA is the Childhood Arthritis and Rheumatology Research Alliance, and we're a nonprofit. We were founded by a group of physicians to conduct and support research in pediatric rheumatology. And our mission is to conduct collaborative research to prevent, treat, and cure pediatric rheumatic diseases. And Vincent has been involved since the very beginning, so he can probably give a more personalized explanation than I can. But Vincent, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Erin. So, so back in the late 90s, early 2000s, a bunch of pediatric rheumatologists got together to discuss what they knew, what they didn't know, and what they needed to find out. And what they learned when they met was that there was a lot that they didn't know. And in order to learn, they understood that because these conditions are rare and there's not a lot of pediatric rheumatologists, the best way to do this would be to conduct clinical research in a network. And they use the Children's Oncology Group as kind of a model for a successful research network where the Children's Oncology Group was able to drastically improve survival rates in pediatric cancer in a relatively short period of time in the research world without new treatments, just by enrolling children in clinical trials and learning the best ways to do things. So that was kind of their roadmap. And they decided to form this network in 2002. And that's kind of where I got involved.
And Vincent, what's your background?
How I got involved with CARRA was I have a child that was diagnosed with one of these conditions. And so what wound up happening was after diagnosis and learning that so little was known about this, I basically said, what can I do to help? And the doctor said, well, we're forming this research network. And I said, okay, great. I'm really good at forming entities and growing them. So maybe I can help you guys form. And then the next thing I know, I'm engaged with CARRA.
And Erin, what about you? What's your background?
So my background is in mostly working in communications for healthcare systems and hospitals. And then I also spent about 4 years working at a company in the clinical trials and expanded access space. And then before that, I was a journalist, was the healthcare reporter in Atlanta for quite a few years. And I was actually involved with CARRA just as a mom, kind of on the side over the years before I actually joined our staff about 1.5 years ago. I was involved with the scleroderma work group because my husband and I have a daughter with a rare form of scleroderma. So I was always looking forward to once a month I would get on a Zoom with a group of doctors working on scleroderma research and be able to provide the parent and patient perspective whenever I could. And so that was how I came to know CARRA and Vincent as well.
Well, it says something about the organization that both of you being parents who, with children who were in need of this kind of support and are now part of the organization. That speaks to the fact that the organization really appreciates this kind of lived experience. Um, if you don't mind me asking, like, is it because there was nothing else, and really CARRA was the only thing that you found to be able to help? Is that kind of what happened?
So from my perspective, Colin, what had happened in my personal lived experience was I went on a all too familiar story of a diagnostic journey, right? And a lot of these children and families experience the same thing. So my son was in an intensive care unit in a hospital for about 3 weeks, spiking 106 fevers twice a day, and was violently ill, paraded in front of every imaginable specialist trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And they tested him and treated him for everything under the sun, and he didn't really respond to anything. And then towards the end of his stay at this first hospital, they had him on a morphine drip. He was 15 months old at the time. And we thought we were going to lose him. And they stopped testing him and they stopped treating him. They were basically waiting for him to get better. And he wasn't getting better. And so at that point, my wife and I basically went to the doctors and said, you either have to test him or treat him. He's not getting better. And that's when a decision was made to move him to another hospital. And then, like always happens in our field, you come across the pediatric rheumatologist who can diagnose the child in under 5 minutes. And that's basically what happened with us. Right. And then after he started getting better and we started navigating back to our new normal, that's when the diagnosis kind of set in, where I kind of understood, okay, this is like a chronic illness and what is this condition? What am I up against here? And that's when I was starving for information. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there. So I created like a list of questions for my son's rheumatologist, literally like on a legal pad, probably dozens of questions, right? What's going to happen? What causes this? What if this treatment doesn't work? What do I do here? Is he going to be able to play sports? Is he going to be able to do this? And basically all the questions were, we're not sure, and we don't know. And I couldn't fathom that in 2001, that this was not known, right? Prognosis was not known. And the answer to in answering my questions, we don't know, the doctor said to me, as his doctor, I have the same questions you do. And really the best way to answer those questions is to do research. And the best way to do research in a rare disease is to do it collaboratively, because no one doctor has enough time, money, or patience to do anything meaningful. And so we're forming this network called CARRA. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I can help you form. And that's how it all started for me.
I was just going to see if I could add one thing about sort of the diagnostic journey that Vincent mentioned that most of us go through with our children. Another piece that I think is really interesting for pediatric rheumatology is that there is a shortage of these doctors. And so it's actually very hard to get an appointment with one. And to me, this was baffling because I had been covering healthcare. I knew a lot about our healthcare system. We lived in Atlanta at the time, and our doctor was at a major academic medical center. And we were told, after this long journey through all these different specialists, well, if it's not, we were going to have a surgery to biopsy a lymph node because they suspected maybe she had lymphoma. And they said, well, if it's not lymphoma, when you're in the hospital, we're going to try to catch a pediatric rheumatologist. And I was like, what do you mean catch one? And they were like, well, because you'll wait months for an appointment. But if you're in the hospital, we can try to catch one who's on call and, rope or bring her in. And so, I thought, wow, this is crazy. We live in a big city, and imagine what it's like. There are 9 states in our country that don't have a single pediatric rheumatologist. So what happens to those families and those children? So yeah.
And so I want to comment on that. But I want to go back to something, Vincent, you said, and maybe have you comment on it, Erin. It sounds like right from the beginning, CARRA and the researchers were very interested in incorporating feedback and listening to people with lived experience, parents, people who are maybe are suffering through the diagnosis as well. Why was that, do you think? I gotta be honest, because it's not a lot of organizations I talk to where this is like right from the beginning, they were listening. I think people grow into it. It sounds like CARRA started right off the bat like this. How embedded is patient and family feedback at CARRA?
So I would say it's pretty much embedded in everything that we do. And, back in the early days when they were inviting me to this meeting, whenever I walked in, I was like the most popular person in the room. And all of these pediatric rheumatologists are running up to me. Oh, Vincent, we're so glad you're here. We're planning this study in lupus. Is this important to families? Would families be willing to enroll in this? Is this the right question that we're asking? Are these the right outcome measures? What do you think? And I would look at them and I'd be like, sounds important, but my son doesn't have lupus. And so they were thankful that I was there, but I understood and they understood that I couldn't speak on behalf of all pediatric rheumatology, that we needed other voices in the room. We had this situation where we understood that it was important to get families in the room, but we really didn't know how to do that. We wound up applying for and receiving some funding from this organization called PCORI, and that was to build out some infrastructure around including patients, formalizing what they were doing with me, right? So let's empower families and give them an understanding about research so that they're not like me, like nervous to raise their hand and speak out, right? And let's also train docs and researchers how to work with families. Health literacy, being respectful. Everybody sits together, right? It's not the parent table and the doctor table, the parent meeting and the doctor meeting. Everybody is integrated. Everybody is sitting together. Everybody is discussing research. And so that meeting that I mentioned earlier, we just had that. Recently, we had 50 patients and caregivers attend that meeting with somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 researchers and doctors. And CARRA is organized into committees and work groups, disease specific and so on. We get lived experience for every one of those work groups. So if there's a lupus nephritis work group, we get lupus nephritis patients and caregivers to attend the work group and contribute to the discussion. And really CARRA, all of the work groups and committees have families that participate. And then on the flip side, we have operations where we also have patients and caregivers that are engaged in those areas as well, because not everybody wants to be a research partner. some people just want to see the success of CARRA, and they're not into the research thing, right? So, for example, we have finance experts that are members of our investment committee or our finance committee. We have parents that are members of the board. We have parents that help with communications and marketing. We have parents and patients that are artists, graphic designers, right? So they would rather lend their professional expertise or skills to the cause than their opinions about research.
But for those of us that are involved with research, one of the really cool things about CARRA is that they have structured it so that the patients are involved in a meaningful way, but also a very equitable way. So maybe we help design a study, we will definitely help review, draft the manuscripts, carry out the study, and then in the end, we oftentimes will get to be a co-author on an article in a medical journal. And so this happened for me a couple of years ago, and I was super excited, even though I've been working as a journalist all those years and, had a byline and lots of different publications. I've never been a co-author in a medical journal. And so that is something that I think is really special that CARRA does really well.
I take it then that CARRA really finds value and has benefited from all of this input from patients, that it's not just tokenism, that it is truly helping them and the organization move forward as well.
So I can quote one of the people that founded CARRA and was a past president. And she was a career researcher. And she said, I will never do research another way. I will always engage. They have made such a dramatic impact on the projects that I would never even consider doing it another way. So Colin, just to be clear, we have families that are involved in every stage of the research life cycle, from ideation to dissemination. We have families that are PIs of projects. Now, they're not the lead PI, they're a co-PI of a project, right? All the way down to focus group. So single point in time, right? Focus group, hey, we need your opinion on this project. Would you enroll in a project like this? Why or why not? And that's kind of validating the appetite for a project like this, or the importance of a project like this, right? And what we do is we seek out people with lived experience in the topic of the project. So for example, if it's a scleroderma project looking at first-line treatments, we're going to want to talk to newly diagnosed scleroderma families. Is this important to you? Why or why not? Should we be trying to answer this question? Why or why not? Would you enroll in it? Why or why not? And the reason why we do that is because we are not cardiology, where we can afford to have a study and approach 100 patients and only one of them decides to do it, right? We need to make sure that our projects have very low barriers, both from the clinic side and from the patient side, and are super important. Because we can't, even in a network, we can't do everything, right? And let's do the most important stuff first. Let's answer the most important questions first. And by including families, we're designing more efficient studies that are easier to recruit for, right? And it's almost like a peer-to-peer situation, right? And so we have found, and there was skepticism in the early days, I'm not going to lie, but every person that we have interacted with, by we, I mean people like Erin and I, every researcher we interact with and help write a protocol, they're like, wow, this is super helpful. I didn't think this, or I didn't think that. and this is it. This is great. And so it just kind of spreads grassroots, like where the doc will say, I had Erin help me with this and it was super successful. You should get a family to help with yours too. Right. And so that's kind of the way it spread. It took a few years, but now we're pretty mature and it's a pretty known commodity within the organization, where the only people that are not completely on board might be the people that are new to the field, right? New to like first-time pediatric rheumatologists, right? Where they haven't been in it for a while.
It's kind of funny too, being at CARRA and being, immersed in the space and thinking about this is the way to do things. I feel like in my outside life as a mom of a child with one of these diseases, I often see examples where people didn't consult the patients or the caregivers, and they're so noticeable to me because I think this shouldn't be this way. A patient would have told you this doesn't work if you had asked, like there was a time when my daughter was prescribed this medicine that was an auto injector, one of those medicines where you tap it on their leg and the spring is supposed to engage. And it was not made for a child. Like it did not work on her skinny little leg. And I thought this could not have been tested on, a small child. It doesn't work. And so it's just those kind of things are kind of glaring to me. Just last week, we were doing I was taking her for routine blood tests, monitoring her. And I've seen this happen several times where, they have the kiosk check-in and it's great for me. I love it. I'm like, 2 seconds, I'm done. But we live in an area with a lot of elderly people. And I've seen this happen several times where, this gentleman was probably in his 80s and he had a horrible time navigating this kiosk and he hadn't uploaded his insurance. And, it really makes you think like you have to consider the wide range of demographics when you're thinking about a product or a study or a service, because otherwise it's not going to work for everybody.
Let me ask you this then. Mechanically, what are some of the things that CARRA does to engage patients? I mean, I'm hearing meetings, I'm hearing of, I won't say symposiums, but get-togethers where patients are involved. You have committees that are selected based on lived experience. What are some of the other ways? Do you use any electronic means to engage with people? Are there communication methods? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So, Erin, you can mention about the communications part of it. Really, we have the research track, right, which we mentioned, where we have families that are participating in work groups, project-specific type work, like we're doing XYZ project and we need families to help with XYZ project, right? And then we have another opportunity in research where we have families review research proposals. So CARRA has an intramural funding mechanism where members can apply to get their research funded. Those proposals are vetted. There's a scientific component to the review where there's 2 scientists that review each proposal. And then there's also a patient or a parent. Now, the criteria are different. The patients and parents are reviewing on acceptability of study design, impact, and patient-centeredness. Is it respectful of the patient's values, preferences, and needs, right? Or is there a plan to share results back to family? That kind of stuff, right? So families basically have an opportunity to prioritize CARRA's research by participating in that review process.
And I just wanted to highlight what Vincent said about, the patients and parents serving as grant reviewers. I really love that example because it's not just about giving the patient or the parent a seat at the table. It's about giving them a vote, like letting them say, do we think this is how CARRA should spend our money? Should we allocate $300,000 to study this? Is this meaningful to you or not? And that to me is just a great example of how we have found a way to include patients in a meaningful and also very equitable way.
Erin, can you talk to me a little bit about the way you communicate and keep the patients and families involved in CARRA?
So we have put a lot of emphasis over the past year and a half into social media. We have a couple we had a couple channels already in terms of like an internal newsletter for all of our members, which does include patients and families. And then we have an external newsletter that goes to the broader outside world, sort of people that we've interacted with, people that, are considered a friend of the organization. But we really kind of ramped up in the past year and a half, focusing on social media as a way to try to reach more people, connect with people who maybe have never heard of CARRA. I've had a couple really cool experiences where people reached out to me. One young woman reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I grew up with one of these diseases 20 years ago. And, she was just blown away by the fact that CARRA even existed and, the work that we were doing. And so, these are rare diseases, but when you make that connection on social media, it's all the more special and all the more important because it's finding somebody who wouldn't have found out about CARRA otherwise. So that's been kind of one of my main things that I focused on.
And Erin, what social media platforms do you use?
So we have, we're active on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we also have a podcast, which we're really proud of. We're so lucky to have a very talented teenager who lives with one of these diseases who actually hosts our podcast. And we're also very fortunate that her parents are professionals. Her dad is a network television producer and her mom's a former journalist. And they took this on as a volunteer effort with Vincent, by the way. This was Vincent's brainchild. And they've just really taken it and run with it. And the beauty of it is, it's a teenager interviewing these doctors and researchers. And so it forces them to explain it in a way that patients and families and kids even can understand. And they've tackled a lot of different interesting topics, just the reality of being a kid going to school with one of these diseases and managing the doctor's appointments and the struggle of sports and life and everything else that goes along with it, to mental health research that CARRA is involved in. And that's been one that's really important because it's something that kind of goes across all these different diseases. Kids deal with this issue, no matter which one of these diseases they may have. So yeah, definitely check out our podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find it. It's called the CARRA Podcast.
And that's a great segue into me making a statement on, congratulating CARRA again for winning the 2025 Swaay.Health Award for best use of social media. Certainly the judges and everyone caught notice of all the work you do across all those platforms. And it's a lot. It's, most people focus on one. You've got all of them, all the majors.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. As a nonprofit with a shoestring budget, that it really meant a lot to us to win that award. And also, I don't have a budget for paid media or an agency to help. So for us, social media is really important because it's, basically free. So I can, make my designs on Canva, crowdsource photos, videos from our families, our physicians. And, the way I look at it is, it's the platforms, it's an opportunity for us to raise awareness about CARRA and the need for research for these diseases, but also to kind of highlight what these kids live with and why research is so needed and why this is important. And then also to, bring attention, put the spotlight on the physician researchers who are working so hard to help these kids. Most of our members are practicing physicians. Like they see kids, they treat kids in a clinic multiple days a week. Then they also do research. They jump on their CARRA work group in the evening. They're also probably raising families of their own. They're working tirelessly for our children. So it's nice to be able to highlight their publications, celebrate when they win a grant or when they win an award. And yeah, it's been a really collaborative effort. I've tried to get, some of our families to share their little tidbits of videos. I made a little very much a DIY video last year for YouTube. Got my daughter to voice it, and other families sent in snippets of their children doing things, and with the idea to kind of show that this is a little bit of the day in the life. Yeah, they have a lot of doctor's appointments and shots and IVs and crappy side effects that they deal with, but they're also kids that, you know, are playing sports and they have plans, and they really do need research to help their lives improve. And then we've also done a couple fun things trying to feature kids' artwork. My daughter did, I asked her to do a drawing. May have bribed her to do a drawing last year for us for Giving Day. And, you know, I said, she was an artist anyway. So I said, just come up with something. I need something. And she sat down and drew her interpretation of like what it feels like to be a kid living with one of these diseases while the world passes you by and doesn't notice. So I was kind of, you know, I was glad that she put that on paper and that she came up with that. And I think it just shows that, you know, you can't really know what a person lives with this condition unless you ask and you know, kind of pull it out of them. And then we have an opportunity to share that with the world and raise awareness of these diseases and why we need CARRA to help these children.
Vincent, final question for you. You know, for any healthcare leader, whether they're at a provider or another nonprofit that may be listening or watching this, what message would you give to them on why they should continue to prioritize engaging with patients and families?
Yeah, I think again, how do you know something is important to the family unless you ask them? And how do you know if somebody's going to be willing to enroll in a project unless you ask them? And to me, it's about moving the needle. And it's not just, I mean, publishing is super important. I get it. It's part of academic career and everything like that. But if the information is not read and not shared and not explained with both the physicians and the families, then it doesn't get adopted. So then what good is it, right? And so by engaging families, if families can understand the results of projects and the doctors are sharing, then maybe we can move the needle a little bit quicker, right? Because what's the point of all the, like, at the end of the day, the reason why I got so involved was because I wanted answers to my questions, and those answers didn't exist. And every night I went to bed, am I doing the right thing? Am I giving my son the right medication? Am I doing the right thing with his life? And those questions, like, you think about any decision you make in life, you have information at your fingertips. What restaurant should I go to? What car should I buy? What TV should I buy? And you list and you type in what you want out of that, your desired outcome in healthcare, right? What is your desired outcome? What size TV? Here are my parameters. You click enter on Google and you have all the information you need to help you make that decision. But when it's, what drug should I use? How should I treat this illness? There's very little information available. And that's a super important decision. And that's kind of why I got involved. And what I would explain to folks that are listening, like the pushback you get sometimes from clinicians is, I don't want to burden the family. I don't want to burden the family. The family's too burdened, right? Give them the opportunity to say no. Please.
And
Give them
also,
the opportunity. You don't
not
know
a
unless
burden.
you talk to them.
It's not a burden. Like for me, it was the only positive thing that came out of years of like suffering and struggle and sacrifice and giving up work that I really loved to spend 4 days a week at a children's hospital and an infinite number of other appointments. Like being asked to join this scleroderma work group, it made a real difference to me, like personally and professionally, and just as a mom. And it wasn't at all a burden. It was really a joy and like an opportunity that I was so grateful for.
Exactly. And like when you're diagnosed, you feel isolated, you feel alone, you feel helpless. I'm not a doctor. How am I going to help my son? Right? How am I going to help this situation? And you're searching for something that you can do that can help your child and help other children like him. And that's what this is kind of all about. So it's not a burden. To me, it wasn't a burden because it gave me the opportunity to make it a better place for my son and kids like him without having to go to medical school. Right? I'm
Thank goodness
too
for
old to
that,
go to medical
Vincent.
school. Right? Like, but it allowed me to use what I was good at and apply that to my son's condition. And in my case, it was basically being an entrepreneur. In Erin's case, it was being a writer and a marketer, right? And then, and it just gave us a way to help the situation. And it was so powerful for me that in 2018 is when I was hired by CARRA. So I had volunteered for them for 17 years. And then they offered me a position as their director of partnerships and engagement. And I left a 30-year partnership with my brother to go out and kind of start all over again in a new career. It's just life-changing for me. It's so enjoyable to meet people and try to make difference in this condition. Because my kids now are older, right? My son, thankfully, is doing well and has been in remission for a while. But for me, it's about the kids that aren't doing so well.
So, Vincent, let me ask you, what other projects are on the docket for you right now? Are there any projects that you're working on at CARRA that have you really excited?
One of the things that I'm super excited about moving forward is not only the registry where we have now 15,000 children that have enrolled in the registry with a goal of following them for at least 10 years. And we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. But that registry allows us to longitudinally collect data from children where we're learning more and more every day about what is the best treatment, what's the interaction of the drugs, what's the safety long-term, and these questions like I had, what happens when my son is 25 years old, we can now start answering those questions because in the old days, when the child became an adult, they went to an adult rheumatologist and the pediatric rheumatologist never learned what happened, right? What's the end of the story? So now with the registry and our ability to continue to collect data into adulthood, we're starting to answer those questions. And then the other piece that I'm super excited about is biosample collection. So CARRA has 2 biobanks, one in the US and one in Canada. And to be able to get a biologic signature of these diseases is really going to advance care. And collecting samples on treatment-naive children and linking those samples to their long-term clinical data will really help us find the best treatment for each child. And when you think about it, like my son has a specific form of juvenile idiopathic arthritis. He's treated based on his symptoms. But then you can have another child who is the same as my son, same subtype, same symptoms, given the same treatment. But my son does well, the other child does not do so well. Why? Think about a headache. You can have a headache from a concussion, from allergies, from dehydration. The treatments are different. The same symptom, you have a headache, but the treatments are different. If you're dehydrated, drink. If you're allergic, take Benadryl or remove the allergen. If you have a concussion, sit in a dark room. In pediatric rheumatology, a lot of times we're treating based on their symptoms and not what's causing the symptoms. And I think that by collecting biosamples, predicting responsive treatment so there's less trial and error, can the child stop treatment based on their biology, right? To remove some of that trial and error, that's super exciting. And that's like the next frontier in pediatric rheumatology, in my opinion.
Erin, final question for you. Where can people go to learn more about CARRA and to connect with CARRA?
So I guess first I would direct people to our website. It's carragroup.org. And then secondly, please check out our social media platforms, follow us, and you can learn more about our work that way. We also have some excellent podcast episodes, one that gives sort of just like an overview history of CARRA with one of the co-founders, and then another one that really does a deep dive, but a layman's term, patient-friendly deep dive into the CARRA registry. So please do check those out.
Vincent, Erin, thank you so much for coming on the program today and sharing both your personal stories and information about CARRA. It's been wonderful to learn more about all of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Colin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Colin. It was terrific.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I literally have a page of notes from that discussion. CARRA is using so many different ways and different channels to engage their patients and caregivers, from social media to their newsletter to their unique podcast. More impressive is how they are co-designing and how all voices and opinions are valued at their organization, not just the ones from people with multiple degrees. I can't thank Erin and Vincent enough for agreeing to join me on camera. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.